A lot of advice I see for writing characters centers around finding their Myers-Briggs personality type or their Enneagram number. And a lot of that stuff can be really interesting and helpful even at some level, especially if you're inspiring conflicts or synergies between characters, interpersonal stuff. But I've noticed with it this tendency to write really developed characters that are really boring because they don't have any inherent inciting aspect to them. And that might sound fancy, but all I'm saying is they don't want anything. Characters have to want something in order to tell a story. They might have a cool name, their physical description is locked in, we have a full tragic backstory, but if they don't want anything, they're effectively furniture. If they don't have any implicit direction, their presence in the story becomes purely aesthetic, and they might as well be a lamp. I've run into this a lot with Dungeons and Dragons characters, and maybe you can relate. I've had a character recently that was a former member of a hidden temple of monks who worked as contract assassins. They had a prophecy regarding a powerful warrior, and my character believed that it might be him. But he failed the trials and was revealed to not be the most special boy. That hits him hard. He's in a tavern drowning his sorrows when a pirate captain picks him up and they go on a quick job that goes wrong and becomes a survival scenario. And the remaining group get back to the port island and my character goes back to the bar to drown his sorrows. The campaign isn't over, but my character didn't really have, amazing growth. So he doesn't want anything new besides to forget his past. He has no reason to be in the story unless an external inciting force pushes him into it, in which case he is merely a passenger of the story and not an agent of it. This is often the case in D&D when you're making a character for the aesthetic rather than for a specific story. But we can easily fall into this trap with the stories that we are writing as well. We have characters that are developed, but they don't have any motivating factor internally to bring them into the story without it being forced upon them. Having defined desires gives a character, or any real person for that matter, direction and momentum defined by those desires. A character that wants something they don't have will eventually do something. Their desires determine their direction. Having defined desires also makes a character inherently more relatable in a way that we as readers or observers can empathize with and become invested in the outcome of that character's story. On the surface level, what I'll call an inciting desire is what gets your character out of bed. These are more specific and might define your audience at some level, but a character that is not only pursuing the ancient buried treasure because it exists and that sounds cool and they're treasure hunters, so that's what they do, but they're pursuing it because they are struggling to make rent, or someone they care about owes money to a dangerous lender. Or say you have a character who's seeking to capture the avatar so they can restore their honor. These are things that we understand and a lot of people can relate with. Because we see ourselves in the character's desire, we want them to succeed. We become invested in the outcome of their journey. On a deeper level, you can add relatability by adding an unspoken internal desire, an internal conflict. By nature, we all have unspoken desires and internal conflicts, so we can all relate to that at some level. I mentioned Zuko earlier, who wants to capture the avatar to restore his honor. We learn over the course of the story what he really wants is to be loved as he is. But the conflict is that he is convinced he has to be a certain way and achieve certain things in order to earn that love. This makes his character more complex and relatable. And over the course of the story, it changes his inciting desire. It changes what gets him out of bed in the morning as he learns and grows in wisdom. But I think where desires become a real power for driving a story through characters is when you introduce obstacles. Obstacles are really what make a story. If a character wants something, then goes and attains that thing without any kind of struggle or growth or discovery involved, that's not much of a story, it's just an account. If my story is that I wake up and decide that I want a banana, so I walk to the store, I buy it, and I bring it home, that's not much of a story. But what if, as I was going to get the banana, I was attacked by a group of assassins from an underground civilization that revere bananas as deities. Or say I get the banana, but before I can eat it, it cries out for mercy and begs me to return it to its family. Even if the inciting desire was relatively mundane, it can become interesting through the obstacles faced in the pursuit of it. Think the hobbits in Lord of the Rings. Basically, they just want to be left alone in the beginning. They want peace. But this massive world threatening conflict is the obstacle in the way of that peace. So their desire develops, becomes something greater to destroy the One Ring. And they end up progressively telling this amazing story from what started as a pretty stationary desire. Though, even if your character desires something really deep and meaningful, it's still the obstacles that make it a story. If your character desires to deliver urgent medical supplies to a remote mountain village, that's a big deal. But it's not a story until a blizzard turns a quick trip into a fight for survival. So all this to say, I'm working on a new template for designing characters that, yes, will include background and description and skills, etc. But instead of 40 points on their favorite colors and flavor of Doritos, I'm outlining what is their inciting desire, what gets them out of bed and into the story, what kind of obstacles might prevent them from attaining that? What effect will facing these obstacles have on the character? Does facing these obstacles change their desire or their perspective on or approach to attaining that desire? And deeper than that, what is the thing that would really give them joy and fulfillment beneath the inciting desires? Is there a disconnect? Are they chasing after things that won't really give them joy? What would it take for them to realize this? Even if the story is plot driven and the conflict is that there are giant man-eating spiders invading the city and everyone needs to fight to survive, defining what our characters want will make the responses and actions within the plot feel more alive. Well, if you are also an aspiring writer, I'd love to hear what you're working on. Let me know what inciting desire you're using to get your characters out of bed and into your story. If you're not a writer, you're just a fellow nerd who loves talking about fantasy stuff and world building. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. My name is Cody. I'm starting this channel as a way to document what I'm learning as I pursue writing and storytelling in hopes that I can inspire you to build your worlds and tell your story. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, I invite you to come along and I'll see you in another video.